With the addition of Zvonimir Ivisic to the Kentucky Wildcats, I think it's pretty clear. UK has the best front court in the SEC.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on in to Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dahl, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be taking a look at the Kentucky Wildcats front court. I think that UK has the best front court in the entire SEC, and I'm going to explain why here in just a second. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everybody out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, would appreciate it if you sub to the show. If you're listening on podcasts, following along, or subscribing wherever you are listening, there would be much appreciated. So let's go ahead and get into it. I think the Kentucky Wildcats have the best front court in the SEC this season. We'll start by taking a look at these four players here at their respective positions, and I will explain why against some of the other big men in this conference, why UK has the upper hand. So you look at Kentucky's two spots here, power forward and center. That's what makes up the front court in basketball. I think the combination at the power forward spot of Aaron Bradshaw and Tre Mitchell is incredibly deadly. And then you pair that up with Ugonna Onyenso and Zvonimir Ivisic, who was just recently added to the squad. The biggest takeaway for me here, why does Kentucky have the best front court in the SEC? Well, one of the main reasons is depth, and I don't mean depth as there are bodies in the room. You can look across the SEC, as we will in a minute here, and see that there are a lot of conferences, or not a lot of conferences, a lot of teams in this conference, rather, that have guys. But I don't think they're going to be as productive as some of Kentucky's players here will be this upcoming season. And on top of that, I just don't think on paper they are as talented. Now, statistically, we may see some different guys rise above these different Kentucky Wildcats here after March, after all is said and done. But as of right now, I think you'll have to look at guys like, let's start with Tre Mitchell. Tre Mitchell was an addition through the transfer portal, the only addition that Kentucky got through the transfer portal this offseason. West Virginia is where he came from. And I think that with Mitchell, it doesn't necessarily matter if he starts, if he's comes off the bench, wherever he is. If it's at power forward, if it's at center, he can play both spots. He proved that during the Global Jam. He also proved during the Global Jam that he can shoot. He's a really good three-point shooter, very good in the catch and shoot, kind of in the pick and pop game, which I think will be incredibly valuable with guys like DJ Wagner and Rob Dillingham being such good ball handlers this upcoming season. He can also distribute. He can handle. He can play defense. I think that he showed a lot of veteran leadership when it came to doing the right things on the court during that event in Canada. I was impressed, and I think that because of that experience, he could end up getting the nod here at either power forward or center. But let's just say for a second that he doesn't. Well, who may take the power forward spot away from him? I think Aaron Bradshaw is a player that needs to be discussed more despite his injury that he currently has, or at least his recovery from the surgery that he had due to his injury. Bradshaw also is a very versatile piece in his own right. I think he's a very good defender. Obviously, at 7 feet tall, it's kind of difficult to not be at least somewhat solid on the defensive end. But on top of this, I don't think he can shoot as well as Tre Mitchell can, but he can also handle the ball a little bit. He's really aggressive in the interior on offense as well. I think that you have two very well-rounded prospects here at your power forward spot. And again, I'm slotting Tre Mitchell here just because, but you kind of follow my logic. Ugonna Onyenso and Zvonimir Ivisic are also two really, really good players in their own right, and I think that Onyenso is going to show that this upcoming season. Does he start? Does he not? Does Mitchell get the nod here? It doesn't really matter. Point being, the Wildcats have depth here, and I think that's the biggest thing. Onyenso, I think, is going to be a really strong presence defensively. Ivisic, we've talked about him a lot on the show recently about how he could end up being a unicorn type of player for the Wildcats. And if he's able to stick around for next year, I mean, there's going to be a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of hype around him, and I really do hope that he is not what 24/7 Sports projects him out to be, which is just another body in practice. I think that Ivisic could be special. I think that he could be very special for UK. So you have depth. You have 4 bodies that I think that could legitimately start at their respective positions. Aaron Bradshaw could start at center. He could do that if Kentucky really wanted to at 7 feet tall. Ivisic, if you wanted to get really weird with it, could play power forward. I mean, you just have a lot of guys that can handle the ball and that are very talented pieces. I think there's a lot of potential there on paper. And then I think the other thing that Kentucky has on top of all of this is at the end of the day, I think they're going to simply have more production than some of these other teams that have talented front court players in the SEC. Part of it is because I have a lot of faith in what Kentucky's going to do offensively this season, and part of it is because when you look at some of these other players on these other teams, these other big men, I should say, they have really good guards and wings on top of that are going to demand the ball. And so if this is simply a statistics match here, I think Kentucky's going to win some battles, but at the same time, I also think that, talent, the depth, it kind of overrides anything that you may see in this league with a couple of potential exceptions. And let's go ahead and get to those. So I compiled some different teams here that have solid front courts and some of the individuals that are going to be prominent in those spots, and I'm going to explain why I think Kentucky's better. Starting with Missouri, the only player that they have that I think is truly worthy of note is Connor Vanover. They lost Kobe Brown to the NBA draft. Really, really good player there. If Vanover and Brown were paired up this season, I would say that that's a top 5 front court in the SEC. Very, very solid pairing that would be, but it's just Vanover. Started his career at Arkansas. I believe he's 7'2". He can shoot. He's proven that in the past. I think statistically he's got a little bit of work to do to kind of get those numbers back up, but that's a solid, tall piece that the Tigers have. I wonder how he's going to fit into that style that Dennis Gates wants to run, that kind of run and gun. Maybe they slow pace down this year a little bit. I'm not sure. Auburn is a team that I think is actually going to speed the pace up this year. Another team that has very solid front court pieces. Jalen Williams and Janai Broome, 2 very experienced players. Janai Broome coming in out of Morehead State last year, was one of the best centers in the league, has shown the ability later on in the year to shoot the 3. Jalen Williams, I think, was the best 3-point shooter on Auburn's team last season. But the problem with both of these guys is you cannot trust Jalen Williams as a ball handler at all. I would take Tre Mitchell over him in a heartbeat. And then also, I just think that Kentucky is more versatile. And I know I continue to use that word, and it's kind of cliche when you talk about different prospects, but I think that they can do a lot more things than Broome and Williams can. Now, can they do every single one of them better than what Broome and Williams can? I'm not sure, but again, depth here I think is a big note. And then also, Auburn has a backup center in Dylan Cardwell, who is very poor defensively, I would say, and really struggles there at times despite his statistics. Mississippi State is the team that I think you could make a case for here with them being, or having rather, the best front court in the SEC. Tolu Smith, I think, may be the best center in this conference. DJ Jeffries, Jimmy Bell from West Virginia transferred in. DJ Jeffries, I believe, was initially from Memphis. I mean, that's a really talented trio there. Very talented trio. But again, I go back to, I think Ivisic has a higher upside than maybe a guy like DJ Jeffries or definitely Jimmy Bell. I think that the West Virginia teammate of Jimmy Bell, Tre Mitchell, is simply better. I think that at both positions, actually. Mitchell played over him, so I don't really think that there's a whole lot to argue there. Tolu Smith is the one guy in this room that I'm really saying, okay, he's so good, it may trump 4 other guys that Kentucky has. So Mississippi State, I think, is a really good front court. And then also, I think we have to note this. They brought in, I can't remember the name of the player. He's from Marshall, a guard, averaged over 20 a game last season. How much do they rely on him and maybe takes away from some of this front court this year? I think that'll be interesting to note. And how much does Kentucky's guards, how much do players like Reed Shepherd, DJ Wagner, Rob Dilling, how much, Antonio Reeves, how much do they take away from maybe a Tre Mitchell or an Aaron Bradshaw? I think collectively the stats, though, for Kentucky's front court are going to be solid. And I don't know if I've come out and said this directly I'm probably going to at some point here in a show soon. I think Kentucky's going to score a lot of points. I think they're going to score a lot of points this year. So statistically, I think Kentucky's going to end up winning some of these battles. Ole Miss has a very interesting pairing of transfer portal additions in the front court from Oklahoma State. Musa Cisse, I believe is how you pronounce his name. We've talked about him here before on the show. 4-star player, high-profile player coming out of high school. Wasn't really able to get a whole lot done with the Cowboys. Transferred into Ole Miss. I think Chris Beard is going to utilize him well. And then somebody that we have talked about, I think we've dedicated 2 shows to him. I know we've done a recap talking about him before in a game against the Wildcats. Jamarian Sharp from Western Kentucky, 7'5". The 2 teams in Mississippi have some really interesting front courts this upcoming season. And again, I'd take Kentucky over them because of the depth. Kentucky's got a couple of 3 7-footers of their own, and then a very versatile West Virginia transfer that can do a lot of things for them. I like Kentucky's depth. I really, really do. They don't just have bodies, they have bodies that could start. They have bodies that could start at half of these SEC schools, maybe even more. Georgia, I think, is a team that you have to look at. Jalen DeLoach was transferred in. Great defender, shot over 55% from the floor. Russell, I think, Tachua from South Florida, averaged over 11 points per game. We talked about him here on the show when we were talking about transfer portals earlier in the offseason. Could be their starter. DeLoach could end up being the guy there as well. They've got 2, I think, decent transfers in there, but again, not better than Kentucky's. Florida, Tyrese Samuel from Seton Hall, double-digit scorer there. Micah Handglotten from Marshall, 7-footer with some serious potential if he's able to pan out for the Gators. I think that next year you could look at Samuel and Handglotten as 2 of the best in the conference, but as of right now, I really like Kentucky and what they've got going there over that. Arkansas is a team that you have to look at, up there with Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Tre Mitchell, experienced player in the SEC, not the tallest, also statistically not the most dominant, but he had different players surrounding him in the front court this past season. And a player that did not have an opportunity to play because of injury a lot last year, Trevon Brazile, a former 5-star for the Razorbacks. He's going to get the nod at center. Those are 2 good players. Those are 2 very good players. Once more, I like Kentucky's depth over the couple of players that Arkansas has behind them that are not even averaging 5 or 6 points a game. I think Kentucky's going to get there. I think that their guys are going to rotate so much so that you're going to have a lot of solid pieces. And I'm not saying all 4 of these guys are going to average like 12 a game. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I think Kentucky is going to be better in a lot of areas. And then Alabama is the final team I want to talk about here. Grant Nelson, we've discussed him quite a bit on the show. We wanted him. That's a good player that the Crimson Tide got. I think it's a player that fits their play style as well with Nate Oates. Alabama's not going to be particularly tall this season, but what they're going to have, I think, is pieces that can fit Nate Oates' system very well. I think they're going to be just fine. I don't think they're going to be nearly as good as they were a season ago, but I think Alabama's going to be a good team, and players like Grant Nelson in their front court are certainly going to aid them. He can handle the ball. He can shoot it. He's a Kevin Durant-ish type of player. If he bulks up a little bit, I think he could be something cool to watch in the NBA. I think he could stick around. But as of right now, with Bama, I think he's going to be a good player. But again, 1 does not beat 4, in my opinion, when it comes to just overall talent that the Wildcats have. So that's my thoughts on Kentucky basketball's front court as opposed to the rest of the players in the SEC. If you want to give your thoughts on some other front court players in this conference, or if I'm wrong, or if I'm right, you can leave that in the YouTube comments below, or hit me on the socials. All right, before we move along here, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time, a new sponsor of the show. Have you ever been stressed out trying to buy tickets? Trying to go to an event? Maybe it's a concert, maybe it's a sporting event, maybe you guys are trying to get some tickets to go to Rupp to see Kentucky play in an SEC game. I know I certainly will be at some point this time next season. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful, guys. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you will have. Game Time is the place for last-minute tickets deals. You need to forget planning these things months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can get exclusive flash deals on ticket for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's a pretty sweet deal that Game Time provides you. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason, so get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what you expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set. The tickets are also sent directly to your phone, so you'll never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.